Hey guys, welcome to the software engineering channel. In today's video we are going to be handling the authentication module of our Slack clone, and this is what our final result is going to look like. We are going to be using Google Authentication for getting our profile, our user's profile, and we are going to be using that to sign our user into Slack rather. So this is what we're going to have. We're going to have a simple login page, and we are going to have our Google account pop up once anyone is selected. We're going to use that to pop in the user's picture. You can see the user picture over here. This is my Google account picture, and we are also going to use that to store our user's cookie. So if I open up my cookie rather, you'll notice that I have a particular cookie here, and what this means is if I eventually do a refresh on this, it doesn't go away. It remembers me. It knows that I'm still signing. And also we are going to implement a sign out as well. We're going to implement this. We're going to have a logout button, and we're going to be able to do this. So this is a very quick one, and we should be good to go. Okay, so this was where we left off. Let's give this a run to be sure we are good. Okay, so you will notice that in the last video we do not have anything called authentication yet. We have just strictly the UI. And so the first thing for us to do is because we are going to be using Google Authentication, right? The first thing is to go into our Google console, and set up a project. So I've done this already, but I'm going to be walking us through on how to go about it. So once you go into my project, I already set up a project already. This is the project I'm using already, but you can go into my project and set up a new project, right? But I'm not going to do that. You can just go ahead and set up a new project, but I have my project here already, and this is the project I would be using. So once I click on this, it takes me into that project, and the first place you go to is your credentials, right? So once you go into your credential, the other thing you do is to set up an Auth client ID. So you can do create new credential. I've already done that. So if you do create new credential, you see create API key, Auth client ID, service account. So what you're going to be doing is Auth client ID, because request users consent so your application can access users data. This is exactly what we want to do. We want to use Google's API to pull out our users data from Google's data store, right? So that we don't have to keep those information. So if you notice the picture I showed you while I was doing the demo, you will notice that it is the same picture that Google is using, right? So that's basically what we are doing. I have created this already, and this is what you should create as well. So yours should look like this as well, right? Yours should look like this when you are done creating it. The next thing for you to do is to add your URL. Now you make sure your URL is this. If your URL is not this, you should know what your URL is by running your application. When I run my application, this is my URL, right? So I'm adding that to this URI section, and I'm also adding that to this. And also it is important to have this /signin-Google. This is Google's convention of adding an authorized redirect URL, right? This is Google's convention, and we also want to add this as well, so that when we are redirecting back into our own page, we do not have any challenge. Okay, so another important thing to note is our client ID and our client secret. These are quite important because we are going to be using these details. These are the details we are going to be using to access our Google account. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so having done that, you might also as well want to download this JSON. What this is going to give you is you're going to have access to these two guys offline, so you don't have to come back into your Google account to have access to these guys. Okay, another thing you want to do is to go into your Auth consent screen. Your Auth consent screen is that screen that does a list of your Google accounts for you to select the particular one you want to use to log in, if that makes sense. So you need to create that screen as well, right? So I've created one already, and it's called Slack clone. So you should be able to create a new Auth screen. If you've not created any at all, you would see a button to create a new Auth screen. And I think all you need to fill in is the title, and I think that should be it. Just the title is fine. Okay, so that's that about our Google section. Once that is done, we can pop into Visual Studio Code. Okay, so having done that, the next thing for us to do is to go into our app settings. I have to go into our app settings and create a section for authentication. So we do authentication and we do Google. And we do client ID, fill it in there, and we also do client secret. Fill it in there. So that you might want to use the user secrets functionality in .NET, or you just pop into your config file, which is your app settings file. I'll just rest with app settings. So I want to go ahead and copy my credentials. So I can get that here, copy my client secrets, pop that in here, and copy my client ID, pop that in here, and that should be it. So the next thing for us to do is to set up our authentication scheme. Now, ASP.NET Core, or Blazor if you will, does not know anything about our authentication, right? So we have to tell Blazor to use a particular type of authentication, and in our case we are going to be using Google Authentication Scheme. So we have to tell that to Blazor explicitly, and that's what we're going to be doing now. So we're basically going to be doing services dot add authentication. So we're going to be adding a lambda expression to further do some configuration. So we're going to be saying options dot default scheme. I found out that I had to put this in for the application to work. So the scheme we're going to be using obviously is our cookie authentication default scheme. So we're using our Google as our data provider, and we are using our cookie to persist our information, right, locally. And basically, you understand why we are using our cookies, just so that our browser can remember our token. So we're going to be doing Google Authentication default. Can get the namespace and pop that in right there. And we have authentication scheme, cookie rather, said Google. So the next, we're also going to be doing something more like it. This time is default authentication scheme, and it's basically the same thing. Next, we're going to be doing options dot default challenge scheme. Before we pop in our Google default dot authentication scheme, which is our challenge scheme, basically the challenge is basically popping up our Auth screen like we saw previously in the demo and picking out information from the list of Google email that we have. Okay, so we're going to install some package, just about one actually, that is going to give us access to using Google's authentication scheme. If I remember, it has something to do with Google. Okay, authentication.google. All right, so this is it. We're going to be installing the 5-point version. You can just do 5.1. So this is it, guys. It is Microsoft.asp.NET Core.authentication.google. That's the package that is going to give us Google's authentication scheme. So we can have Google defaults, authentication scheme. Okay, so we're going to go further by adding cookie. Let's do an option. So this is where we configure our cookie storage as well. So we do name. This is where we configure the name of our cookie. So for us, we can just do Slackiffy Auth cookie. And we can also specify our login path here. Our login path is going to be auth/google-login. That's going to be our login path. And here we have add Google. This is where we're going to be adding Google scheme as well. Option. So it's more like a chain of method, which makes it look really beautiful, if you ask me. So yeah, we are going to be using iConfiguration to pop in our details from app settings. We want to get our client secrets and our client ID. So we're going to do Google Auth section. Call to, I can do configuration dot get section. We're going to be getting the, in order for you not to make mistake, you can just copy this and pop it right in. So we're going to be getting that section, and we're going to be doing this as well, because remember we have this section within this section. It's like a subsection of the authentication section. So we're referencing the authentication section and the Google section, which gives us access to the children information that we have within. That makes sense? Okay, so now we can have option dot client ID. So we're going to be supplying our client ID. We can do Google Auth section, getting the client ID, which is our key, and also we'll do the same for our client secrets. We can do Google Auth section for our client secrets. Okay. So lastly, we can set up the scope. So the scope is you basically telling Google what exactly you need to pull. And I think there are about 3 to 4 scopes, if my memory serves me right. But the one we are going to be using is the profile scope. So within the profile scope, there are certain things that you have access to. So which contains your email, contains your name, contains your profile picture, and all of those good stuff. So we're also going to be doing this. We're going to be handling an event. The event is called on creating tickets, which returns an asynchronous context. What we need here is the picture URI. And what we basically want to do is to save it as a claim. .user .get property. I want to get the picture property. We're getting string. Okay. So we are doing context dot identity dot add claim. Here we are creating a new claim. And the name of the claim is picture. And you see how this makes a lot of sense, guys. Because at the end of the day, we would be able to access that specific picture as a claim within our user identity class. So can return task completed task. Okay, that ends our authentication scheme setup, and with this we should be good to go to the next step. Okay, so in the next step we're going to be adding our authentication middleware, which is quite simple. All we have to do is to pop in app.use authentication. That's it. That basically tells our application that during our application pipeline, authentication is needed. And since we're going to be using our controller as well, we're going to be creating a controller that handles all of the routing from Google to Google's Auth consent screen and redirecting back to our login page and all of those good stuff. So we have to do endpoint.map controllers as well, so that we can get that API-like feature, if that makes sense. Okay, so the next thing for us to do is to create our controller, API, if you will, as well. So we're going to create a folder. I'm going to title this folder controllers. And here we're going to be creating just a single controller for now. Empty MVC controller, and we're going to be calling this Auth controller. Okay, since we are using more like an API thing, we're going to be inheriting from the controller base class. Let's have our route set up as well. So yeah, we're just going to be doing controller so that we have Auth, not the conventional API / controller, if you know what I mean. And we have API controller as well, attribute as well. Okay, so the first endpoint we're going to be writing is our Google login endpoint, and that is our login part basically. So we're going to have Google login public sync task login sync. So this is quite simple. We're just going to do an await on our HTTP context dot challenge sync. We'll pop this in, and our type of challenge here is our Google defaults. Pop in our Google Authentication Scheme and a new authentication property. And what this basically is going to help us do is to help us configure our redirect URL. All right, so you notice that our redirect URL in Google is this, right? But we need to customize it so that we can have Google redirect back to our home page, because that's what we want immediately after the challenge is over, the verification is over, if you will. We want Google to redirect back to our home screen, so we're going to have that. So that's basically it. And we also want to have another endpoint that handles our sign-outs. So we're going to say sign-out. Let's pull that in. And we're going to do a public sync action results this time, because we're going to be redirecting back to our own page and we're going to be returning something. So we can call this logout sync. This is quite simple as well. Dot sign out. Simple, intuitive, and very easy to understand. So we're basically going to be redirecting back to our home page. So we're supposed to have a tilde sign here. I'm going to use my on-screen keyboard because my tilde sign on my keyboard is bad. Okay, so make sure you have this here because that redirects to your home page, otherwise it might not, say if it works for you. Okay guys, so this is all about our controller. We have two APIs. We have a Google login and we have sign outs. So the next thing for us to do is to let's do a build, rebuild, and be sure our application is still LD and it still works. Okay, so the build was successful. So the next thing for us to do is to revamp our index page. You will notice that currently we still have, oops, this is broken. So let's have a new one. Build up. Okay, so you'll notice that we do not have authentication set up here. If our user is not logged in, we want to pop them back into the login page. If our user is logged in, we want to display their profile picture on this place and also saving the authentication cookie so that even when they do a refresh and all of those things, they are still back on the login page. And we also want to do a little logout drop down over here so we can have our user log out. All right, so let's go into our index page and have a little revamp over here. So we're going to be using a tag called authorize view. For authorize view, we can basically set up a view that should be seen when our user is authorized and a different view that should be seen when our user is not authorized. So we should only have this particular display visible when our user is authorized. So let's do a demo here and say not authorized. Save this. Okay, so we have this error: authorization requires cascading authentication, blah 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 blah. Okay, so if you have this error, it's quite simple. I omitted a step, so you need to get down here and add a wrap. You need to wrap all of this in a cascading authentication states. Yeah, so copy this and wrap it in this tag. And guys, we need to have a prettier for Visual Studio. That's an idea for anyone who cares to execute. Okay, so let's save. It's a refresh. Okay, that works. We should have not logged in, and that's why you can't see anything, right? So we should fix this as well. Our navigation should also not display. Okay, so how we're going to do that is to go down to our layout page, our main layout page. We're going to pop out our navigation from there. So all we have is our body, and we're going to pop in our navigation into this view. So including our navigation as well should not be seen if the user is not authorized. Okay, so we have not authorized. That's what we want to be seen. All right, so let's the next thing for us to do is to create our login screen. So let's create our login screen. That's the screen that we want our user to see when they are not authorized. So it's basically going to be a component, and we can, okay, I was looking for my components folder. Okay, so let's create a login component. That's the components we want our user to see when they are not logged in. So we'll call it login. It's a very simple component. So instead of this, we can have our login components. Save on that. Okay, so we're going to have a div. We're going to have a class of background gray 100. And guys, make sure your terminal is running, right? Because without this, your Tailwind is not going to be compiled. So make sure you have this particular command running on your terminal, so you have this rebuilding thing going on. Okay, so we have flex. We have each screen because we want to have a full width and a full height. We have full width as well. Going to be using flex rather. So we have place, items, center. Okay, so let's have another div. This div is going to be housing our image. We're going to have something like a Slack image right in there. Let's get our Slack image out of my PC. So guys, you can just get a Slack logo. That's what I'm going to basically do. Right, I'm just getting Slack logo into my folder. All right, so source is going to be images and Slack. But I noticed that this particular part doesn't work, so you have to remove this and just let it remain like so. All right, so next we have an H1 says sign into Sign codes community. I mean, that can be your name as well, but anyhow. All right, so we have design codes slack.com, and we also going to have our button that says sign in with Google. Okay, we should see what we have side by side. Okay, so let's work on our page. Remember what we wanted. Okay, we don't have this anymore. So what we wanted is something like this. Right, this is what we want. Okay, so we already have a class. We're going to give this a padding 20. We're going to give it a background of white, so we can have it look a bit different from its gray background. And we're going to have it have a rounded borders on a medium scale. We're going to give it a drop shadow just so you can have a little bit of lift of 2XL. I'm going to pop all its content to the center, and here we should use grid instead of flex. We should use grid instead of flex. center, and we're going to do a justify center. Okay, so see what we have. This is what we have. Let's work on our image. Our image looks too big, so we're going to have class. Basically, we're going to have a height of 28. We're going to have it pop into the center, or it's already in the center, so we can leave that. Let's see what we have with a height of 28. That should shrink down our image drastically. And okay, all right, and we want this guy to be in the center. Okay, so can we do margin auto? Okay, that works. All right, so look at the box, the shadow, the drop shadow, guys. Very beautiful. So that gives it some kind of elated view, if you will. So let's do a margin top of 4 pixels. Sorry, of 4 in Tailwind's language, and a margin bottom of 2. Let's set up our H1. So we have a class. We have text of size 2XL, just to make it big, and you have a font bold to add some weight to it, and we have a PT of 5 just to move down a bit. And also for our link, we're basically going to have margin bottom of 8 to push down our soon coming button. So let's give this an href. This is going to be pointing to our API login route. So this is going to be Google/login, and that in turn is going to should invoke our Google challenge, which is basically invoking our authentication screen. So let's set up our button. Let's have a background color of green, 700. Let's have it rounded. Let's have a P2 and a text white. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, this looks cool to me. Why is our image here? Can we do auto on our image? That should move our image right into the center. Okay, that looks good to me. Okay, so let's test out our login with Google. And what we want to do is, let's see if we are redirected to our home page. So let's click on this. So you can see that, guys, this is what we call our Auth screen, right? And obviously it picks out this particular name from the Auth screen we created, which is our Slack clone. So it all makes sense. I'm going to be logging in with this account. Yeah. And now you notice that it actually redirects us to our own page, which means we are authorized, right? So all of our information actually lies in our context, right? So from this context, this is where we're going to be pulling out our name, our picture. So when in the next video, we're going to be wiring up our SignalR chat feature. That's where we're going to be pulling out our name from. We're going to be doing all of those cool stuff. So let's pull out. Also, let me quickly show you that we have our cookie set up as well. So if you go into your application, you should see something called Slackiffy Auth cookie. These are cookies set up as well. All right. So yeah, it all works out well. So next thing for us to do now is to pop in our picture into this section and also create some kind of like a logout button. This is my own version of Slack. Anyways, I'm sure Slack doesn't have that particular feature, but we are going to have that particular feature to sign out our users. So once they are signed out, they are basically going back into that login view. That's what we're going to be doing now. So let's get back into Visual Studio Code. Pop this right into the side. I can have it closed actually. So let's go into our nav menu. So that's where we're going to be constructing our image. But before we go into our nav menu, let's fetch out, we're going to be fetching out our image URL as a parameter. So let's actually open up our nav menu. Open that up from here. Without. So nav menu. Let's pull that by the side. So our nav menu, which is a child component, obviously is going to be receiving a parameter called image URL. Okay, so instead of this icon, we're going to be popping in an image. Now this image is going to hold our profile picture, and this is going to be binded to our image URL. That makes sense. And okay, so this image URL is obviously going to be coming from the parent, right? Our parent component. So because of this particular tag, we have access to our context, so we can easily do image URL, which is obviously a parameter now, so it's expecting it. So we can do @context dot user dot claims. So we're just going to be using link to fetch out our claim. So we'll do user dot type, which is obviously the type of the claim, is equal to picture. I'm going to be doing a first or default, and we're going to be fetching out its value. All right, so that is supposed to send in our picture. I doubt if it's gonna allow me to do that, so just let it be on a straight line. So basically this is what we have. We're trying to dig into our user claims, and of the many claims that are in there, we're picking out the claim whose type is picture, and we're picking out its value. So that's going to send our picture right into our navigation bar. So let's see, let's check that out. So you notice in our navigation bar, we now have our profile picture. So we just need to design this out and make sure it looks good. So let's go back into our nav menu and set up our profile picture. We have a class. So basically we want it to have an height of 10. We want it to be fully rounded, and we want to have a cursor pointer property on it. So we also want to give it some type of shadow. Let's see how that looks. Okay, so that looks good. Okay, I was going to say that looks good, except from the fact that our height isn't working. Okay, so now we want to construct our drop down so we can have that accessibility to logout. So let's construct our drop down here. It's going to be a div, and the div is going to have an A tag. Obviously the route is going to be auth / sign out. And in the div we have 2 items in a span. Firstly, we have we can have a text, we can have logout, and we're supposed to have so let's fetch out a logout icon from Iconify. So we can do logouts. This looks good to me, but I want to flip it. It's copied. Span. Okay, so I'm going to give this data width 16. Let's see what we have. Okay, so this is what we have here. We have the icon, we have the text. Let's be sure the functionality actually works. So when we click on this, okay, so it actually logs us out. So we can log in one more time. Can log in. All right, so the functionality works. So but then we need to make this look very good. So let's do that by popping in some class. So we have absolute. Let's give this background gray 200. Okay, flex, obviously flex colon. Making it rounded. Giving margin top of 1. Giving the padding of 2. I want all the text within it to be small, and we're also giving it a Z index 50. Okay, so let's see how that looks. Okay, so this is what we have. Looking good. So let's go into our A tag. So giving it flex because we want the icon and the text to be side by side. On hover, we want to give it a different background of blue 200. So I want to give it padding left and right of 4. Tailwind's language py padding up and bottom of 2. So I want to give it the cursor pointer effect, and we want to make it rounded as well. See what that looks like. Okay, I'm not seeing. Okay, so you can see that little effect. We're going to sort out this. We're going to sort that out. Okay, so but then the icon is still very much side by side, so we would have to push the icon a bit and give it a margin right of 2 and margin top just a bit of 0.5. It's good. See how that looks. Okay, that looks good. Okay guys, so I haven't done this. This is what we have. So we have this. What we will need to do is to go to our team account info, and firstly we'll need to add of this as an index of 10. And also I noticed that where that problem came from is on our side menu. So for the fact that we have flex and we have relative is causing that issue. So we can remove relative and do a save, and that should solve that problem. Let's see. Okay, so that solves that problem. So now we have our logouts, but we do not have some kind of hide feature and show feature, toggle kind of feature, right? There are a lot of ways to do this, but I found out a very interesting way, of which I'm going to be creating a YouTube video tutorial on that particular library that I found. It's just a way to dynamically set classes in Blazor. But for now, I'm just going to be breezing over it. So the first thing we want to do is to download a Nugget package. Let's get in a Nugget package. And the Nugget package is called let me get that package again. CSS builder. CSS class inline builder. I think that's what the package is called. Okay, so this is called. So it's called toolbuilds.web.css inline builder. Very beautiful package, guys. I'm going to make a full video on how this works, but for now let's just have the package popped in. Okay, so now that we have the package, we are going to dynamically, because what we want to do is we want to be able to handle our click events, right? So let's get in a class into this place called public, or we can actually do protected. So public void should show. This is going to undo mouse events. Now we also want to have a private bool hidden. So that's going to help us handle our hidden. So normally if you actually want to hide this guy, right, all you just need to do with Tailwind.css is to add an hidden. That's pretty much all you need to do, and that's the same thing we are going to be doing here. And it is very strategic that you are using the same name as the class name you want to toggle. That is like really important. So if you go here, you'll notice that it's hidden, right? So it's important that we use the same name. but we want to do this dynamically, and we want to do it such that it only happens when we click on the image, right? So let's do a protected void on initialize. Let's override. We should have an override here. Override void on initialize. So on first load, we want to have this dot hidden equal to true. All right, so we want to have our hidden equals to true. So it means on first load, that particular drop down should be hidden. Okay, so let's tie in our on click event here. Let's say on click should show. Okay, so now this is where the magic comes in. So instead of writing in all our classes here, we're going to use this CSS inline builder, CSS class, that's what's called, to add all our classes dynamically. So it says CSS class. So we can add in all our classes, but then we need to separate them with a comma. So what this CSS class does is to concatenate all of these individual classes with the comma. So I mean, each of the comma means an individual class, so it knows how to do the split. And another beautiful thing it now does is it can also use a Boolean flag. Okay, let's just do this first. So I haven't concatenated all of this. It can actually use a Boolean flag to add a particular class. So in this case, we want it to be such that we want to add an hidden class dynamically, right? If hidden is true, it should be added. If hidden is false, it should not be added. So the way we do this is we simply do a new and we pop in our hidden. As simple as that. Now, once this hidden is true, hidden is going to be added as part of these classes. Once hidden is false, it's not going to be added. It is so amazing, so beautiful. So what we just need to do now is to get back to our import statements and do a using static pop it in. That should remove these red squigglies. Okay, so let's give it a save and get back to our browser. Let's refresh this. Okay guys, one thing, we didn't add our functionality. So what we basically want to do here is to toggle our hidden. Basically want to toggle it. Watch this, guys. Beautiful. So let's see how this works. Actually, let's see how it works. So notice that it builds all of those classes together, and once we click on this, you can notice that we have the hidden property. But once you click on it again, notice that the hidden property is gone. And basically that's how that particular package works. I'm going to make a full video on how the package works. I'm sure guys are going to find it very useful, especially in the Blazor ecosystem. So we can easily do a logout, and we can easily come back in. Let me try another account. Can easily get back in. So that's it, guys. This is it on our authentication feature. In the next module, we are going to be tying up our SignalR, doing all of the adding of channels, adding of doing the two-way communication, and doing all of the real-time messaging feature. Okay, guys, do well to hit the subscribe button if this is the first time of you popping into this channel. It's a software engineering channel, and we do all things software engineering. If you also like the feature, do well to give it a like, do well to give it a thumbs up. See you in the next one, guys, and be ready to tie up some SignalR in the next video tutorial. Bye bye.